Hello everybody, it's good old Terry here, coming at you pre-recorded from Rebel Rooster Studios, also known as my garage here. I'd like to start by wishing you a happy Thanksgiving. And for those of you who aren't out here in the States and don't have Thanksgiving, I just wish you a happy today. You woke up, it's a good day, and I wish a happy one of it to you. So anyway, let's get into this video. I'll put my spectacles on so I can see my cue cards, because I'm just not smart enough to remember all this stuff without them. Anyway, we're going to talk today, the first of a series of airbrushing videos. We're starting at the very basic level. We're going to start with what is airbrushing and go from there in this series of videos. Now, it sounds really complicated. And that's usually because, like many things, the people who are, let's use the term veterans at something, people who have been doing something for a long time, it seems very easy to them, okay? So they'll use terms that you're not familiar with, and it's just going to be really intimidating sometimes when you ask a question with airbrushing. People, you might ask, what's a mammal? And then someone starts telling you all the biology of, say, a cow. They're telling you about the cow has this many stomachs and all this other stuff, and that's not what you wanted to know. You just wanted to know what a cow was. So we're starting with that kind of basic level, and we'll work our way up from there. There's two big words in modeling. We all know that those two words are cheap and easy, right? I know what some of you guys are thinking. Get your head out of the gutter there. Anyway, so is it expensive? Yeah, it can be. It can be expensive if you do two things. If you do it wrong, and it can also be expensive if you have a very elaborate system, which, later in the series we'll get into that type of thing. But for now, let's just talk about a couple of the basics. Mistakes you don't want to make at the beginning. And one of the first ones is the cheap is best thing. Let me take you back to 15-year-old me, which was quite a while ago, when I still had hair and I was listening to Iron Maiden records, which I still do. But anyway, I was wanting to be a guitar player, right? So I went to talk to my friends who played guitar, and they all told me, you need to get a Fender Strat or a Gibson SG, a Gibson Explorer, just something. It doesn't have to be the high end, but don't buy the cheap knockoffs. And so I saw what those Fender guitars and Gibson guitars cost, and I went to the pawn shop and I saw Squire by Fender, which was, not expensive, but still out of my range. So I went to the Sears catalog. Remember those? Teenage years, looking at the bra section and everything. But anyway, the Sears catalog had an electric guitar in there for like $49, something like that. So I bought it, and it was a piece of crap. The action was like this high. The neck, I swear, the thing was made of rubber and it would bow. It was a crappy guitar, and I didn't enjoy playing the guitar. I almost quit lessons pretty quickly because it was just so bad. And then somebody let me borrow their guitar. It was a good guitar. It was a high-end Squire Stratocaster, which was made in Japan back then. And it was a good guitar. Sorry for the snorting. I got a little bit of a sinus infection. But anyway, the long and short of it is, after playing that good guitar, it was not painful. It was not difficult. I didn't have to tune it every 5 minutes. And I saved up after, cutting grass and, washing mildew off exterior walls and doing little odd jobs to get my first real guitar. And it just became joyful, and I've been playing for, a long time off and on. But anyway, that's the kind of thing you don't want to do. There's cheap airbrushes out there that are decent, but most of them are just really kind of crap, and they're not going to make you enjoy it. You're going to spend too much time cleaning it, taking it apart. They're going to break, they're going to leak. So we'll get more into that kind of thing later. But that's one of the biggest mistakes. So don't go thinking cheap right away. It's best just to make a little bit of a bullet bite early. And, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And on the other side of the spectrum, you can make the mistake of going whole hog and buying a great big giant, 1-gallon tank compressor and all this, elaborate stuff that you really don't need. we'll, you know, just kind of aim in the middle. We'll get to that. But for now, let's talk about the basics of airbrushing. We'll get you started, okay? So sit in, buckle up, grab a drink, and we'll get going. Okay, let's get to the basics of it here. Really quick, before we get started, those of you who watch my videos frequently know that you're going to need your Dramamine because I'm going to be bumping into the camera stand and it's going to wobble and you're going to get seasick. I'm going to try my best not to do that, but it is smack dab in the middle of my drawing area, so you're probably going to see it shaking a little bit. I'll try to keep that to a minimum. Anyway, the basics. We're going to keep this very basic. What we're doing is we're going to take air, and we're going to need an air source. That's going to come in one of three forms here, okay? There's going to be you can get a compressor or a compressed air can, or a lot of people like to use those compressed gas cylinders. Usually carbon dioxide or nitrogen. First thing I would do is I'll draw a big X through this air can, these compressed air cans. They are a waste of your time and they are a waste of your money. For one thing, the going rate's what, 10 to 12 bucks a can, and you're going to be lucky to finish 2 good models with them. So every model you're going to be adding price there. The other thing I don't like about them is they get cold while you're using them. And you have to keep sticking them in warm water to make them work. They're just not worth the money. Cross those out. It's $10. I'll just get one to see if I like it. I guarantee you, you're not going to like it for long. Okay, so that leaves you with a compressor or the compressed gas bottles, or I shouldn't say bottles. Well, I guess we'll say bottles because I can't think of a better word. Anyway. You scuba divers are going to be quite familiar with these because you use all kinds of gases when you're diving. Not carbon dioxide, but anything. But anyway, those are the 2 most frequent gases you're going to see using. Now, these are a great idea because they last a very long time. And the air is exceptionally dry coming out of them. The problem with these is it's not everybody can really get their hands on these kinds of things. And you know, much less find somewhere to keep filling them up. But they do, once you fill these up, they're usually pretty good sized. They last a very long time. The gas comes out dry. But it's just, I'm going to try to keep it to something that is pretty simple. And I'm not Xing that out because they're bad. They're very good. I'm just Xing them out because the easiest thing to get your hands on is a compressor. And basically what that is, it's just a little piston assembly that moves up and down, compresses air and sends it into a little collection tank, okay? Sounds complicated. It's not. There's an on and off switch. That's all there is to it, and it knows what to do. And then the air is going to come out of this thing. And from there, it's going to make its trip to the airbrush. And I'll draw you 2 of them here. I'll draw you a gravity-fed airbrush and a suction-feed airbrush. Alright, you have to excuse me wanting to draw everything. I spent too many years as a flight instructor and I am just, it's just in me, man. Anyway, now we don't want to just send the air directly to the airbrush because we got a couple issues to address first, okay? First, this is going to be coming out at a pretty high pressure out of this compressor, okay? Basically, this is just a aquarium's pool pump. It just puts air out, okay? It's just a lot more expensive. But anyway, so the first thing you're going to want, the first stop you're going to want to make with this compressor is you're going to want a pressure regulator, okay? And I will take the camera up and show you these things after we do the drawing here, okay? The pressure regulator is going to either increase or decrease the air pressure going through it to the hose, which will go to your airbrush eventually. And it's very easy to use. There's a knob on the top, and you just turn it one way to get the air up, and you turn it another way to get the air to go down. It's just like the knob on your stove. If you want a boil of water, you're going to turn it all the way to high, right? And if you just want to melt some butter, you're going to turn it down to low. Okay, same principle here. The only difference is you can put your hand on this and not burn it, right? Many of these will have what's called a water separator on the bottom of it, okay? Now, the reason you got a water separator, particularly those of you in the southern United States or Southeast Asia, you're quite familiar with humid climates. So there's a lot of moisture in the air as it is. Now, when you're putting this compressor on, it's compressing that air. And we know that when we compress air, it gets pretty hot, right? And then when we expand it to let it out, it's going to cool. And you know when you make something hot and then you cool it, it's going to start making moisture. That moisture is going to come out as water. And the problem with water in your air hose is it's going to eventually wind up in your paint. And it's going to spit. And it's going to make your model look like trash. Okay, so the water separator is going to be one of two places. Most pressure regulators will have a water separator in the bottom of it. All right, the water will separate into this little jar here. I'll just call it a jar. You'll see it when I show you the thing. And there's a little push button valve on the bottom 9 out of 10 times. And all you got to do is periodically, while the compressor's on and there's pressure in it, push this button up. The water's going to come on out. Some people put a little rubber hose on there to make it easier. It doesn't matter. Big thing is, occasionally you're going to want to empty that out. Some compressors have a large tank on them. And these compressors will have a little nut on the bottom. You just undo that periodically to let the water out of there, or it's going to rust up inside your tank. The one I use doesn't. Most of them don't, but some of them will. So we've got the compressed air coming through the regulator to give us the air pressure we want. The water is being separated from it. Oh, and before I go that far, there's going to be, if you don't have this type of water separator, you can get another small one that fits on the bottom of your airbrush. I don't really like to use these myself because when I'm building a model, and I do airplanes all the time, it's pretty much all I do. Looking at it from the back, this stem gets pretty long, and it's really hard to get in here to paint the fuselage without it bumping up on the wing and getting in the way. So I try to get the one that's on the pressure regulator. So anyway, we're going to get this through a hose, and this hose is going to go to your airbrush. Okay? Along the way, these hoses are typically anywhere from 4 to 8 feet. You might lose a pound or two of pressure. It's not a big deal. But it's going to go to your airbrush. And you got two types. You've got what's called a gravity-fed airbrush, and you got what's called a suction-fed airbrush. Now I want to change the spelling here so it says suction, because in my opinion, these kind of suck. They're not terrible. They're not horrible. It's not going to make you a bad modeler, but I don't like the suction-fed because it takes a lot more air pressure to draw the paint out of this paint bottle and suck it up into the airstream than to just let it fall into the airstream and go to your model. So my preference is, and you know, it's just my opinion, so take it as fact anyway, but to just take, you know, these suction feds, they're good for metallics or primers, but you know, then you got to have another airbrush for fine work. So I always like to get the gravity fed. And it's going to go into your airbrush. Some people put what's called a MAC valve right here. Some airbrushes have them up here in the front. This is a very mixed up piece of equipment with what people think it does. You're going to hear 8 out of 10 airbrushers, modelers I should say, professional airbrushers know their equipment well, but most modelers they get mixed up, we'll say, and they're going to say this changes your air pressure. It does not necessarily change your air pressure. That's done back here at the regulator. What this does is this controls the air and paint, I should say, kind of mixing process. If yours has one, I encourage you to play around with it, and experiment. You can get some really neat things from this. You can get speckling like this, or you can do what I do and just leave it wide open so it paints regularly. But a lot of people, when they weather their planes and they want oil splatters and mud splatters, this is a neat little thing to have. It's not necessary. You can certainly live without it. There's other ways to do the effects, but it's a neat little thing to have. But I use it probably, for every 20 hours of airbrushing I do, I'll use it for about 30 or 40 seconds just to get some weathering effects. But, if you want to get it, give it a try. You might like it. You might get really good with it. But it's not necessary. So you don't have to have it. So I'm just going to put a dotted X through it. And if you do have it and you're just starting airbrushing, I would just leave it wide open all the time, okay? Because you're not going to be needing it yet. So anyway, it's going through the airbrush. And now that we're talking about the type of airbrushing, you're going to see two more terms. You're going to see single action or dual action. All right. Think of this kind of like, you guys who like to shoot, the difference between single action, double shooting handguns. One, you got to pull the hammer back and then you pull the trigger, and then the others, you just pull the trigger and everything happens, okay? Not too dissimilar with airbrushing. The single action airbrush, basically, you push the button down and the paint comes out with the air. You'll usually see this on the suction fed airbrushes. And then you'll adjust the nozzle of the paintbrush, the airbrush, to change your spray pattern from fine to wide, okay? The dual actions will do two things. You push down on the trigger, which is right here. You push down on it to start the airflow. And then you draw it back to get the paint out. The more you pull it back, the more paint you get out. All right? The air is pretty much a one-size-fits-all. It's either on or it's off. Okay? And then you control how much paint is going. That's variable by the farther you pull it back. Okay? And we're going to get later on in the series how you can just get infinite possibilities by varying your air pressure, your paint thinning ratio, and how much you're pulling this handle back. So there are the very basics of the airbrush. We're taking air, we're sending it to the airbrush through a regulator to give us more or less air pressure. We're taking the water out of it so it doesn't crap up our paint job. It's going through a hose into the airbrush, which preferably is going to be a gravity fed, or some people will use the suction fed. Nothing really wrong with it. I just don't like it myself. And that's really all there is to it. It's not that complicated. So now, let me take the camera up here and I'll show you the components. Okay, everybody, so here's a compressor. It's got an on-off switch here. There's a pressure switch. You don't need to really concern yourself with it. It's just part of the compressor. But basically what it does is it just turns this thing on and off so it knows when to run and when not to. And it's all automatic. So anyway, automatic based on your pressure that you set. Here's the pressure regulator assembly. Here's a little knob we turn to increase or decrease the pressure. Here is your water separator with the little, you can see the little windows here to let you see if there's water accumulated. And there is the pressure gauge. So what you do, you can see it's got 0 pounds on it right now. It's mounted upside down, by the way. You turn it on and you can see the pressure is building it up. Then you can set it lower or higher depending on what you're doing, okay? Now, when you set this, you're going to want to make sure you set it. I'm going to run my airbrush here out of the where you can't see it. But you see how it loses the pressure and it only runs about 18. So if you want a real 20 pounds, what you want to do is increase the valve, the pressure regulator valve towards it's a full 20. Now when you cut it off, you're going to see it's probably going to put in more than 20 pounds, but when you shoot it, it's going to drop back down to 20, okay? If you want less pressure, again, set it while it's running. I want, say, 15 pounds, that's right about here. There you go. And then when I let go, you see it's going to jump back up to nearly 20, but when I do shoot it, it's going to drop back down to 15. Now, down here's the water separator. This is where the water goes when it gets separated. And this little valve here, some people attach a rubber hose to there so they can push it up and it'll shoot down here, but I don't really care for that. I'm just going to, you see right down here, I'm just going to push up on that bottom piece, and you're going to hear that go off, and the water would shoot down over here if there was water in it, okay? Then it's going to get down to the airbrush through the hose, and you can see I've got an Iwata HPCS. This is a gravity-fed dual action airbrush. So when I push down, the air comes out. Let me turn this thing back. There we go. I push down, the air comes out, and as I pull the trigger back, the paint would come out with it. I've got a MAC valve down here, which I'm just having here for display purposes. I've got it in a wide open position so everything comes out. And that's basically all there is to it. It's really not so complicated now, is it? So, we empty it out. I've turned the compressor off. Now you can also do that by squeezing the air out for your airbrush. It's just quicker to do it that way. But that's really all there is to it. Okay, so that's where we'll leave off this episode here. I hope that helped you. It explains the basics of airbrushing. And it kind of pops that balloon idea that it's a complicated process to do. It's really not much to it at all, is there? For the next episode, I guess what we'll be doing is addressing what kind of paint you should use, which I'll give you the short answer now. The type that suits you is the type of paint you should use. But I'll give you a look at the basics of the different types, you know, lacquers, solvent-based acrylics, true water-based acrylics, you know, those kinds of things, and the types of thinners and the thinning ratios. And then you kind of decide for yourself which type of paint you want to use. And then from there we'll go on into other subjects, and look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please like and subscribe if you like it. If you don't like it, as always, don't tell anybody a soul. Anybody. Any questions you got, put them into comments, and I'll try to fit them on in there. I'll answer them if I can. I'll try my best to, but I'll get them into the later parts of the series. And again, thank you so much. Have a great day or night wherever you are, and we'll see you next time.